Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. The New Hampshire presidential primary is over, and now the down-ballot races are really starting to get a lot of attention. One is the battle to unseat Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen. But before anyone can face the senator, they have to win what is shaping up to be a hotly contested primary. And Corky Messner is one of those Republicans, and he is our first guest this morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. So Corey Lewandowski is out of the picture now. It's a three-man race here in the Republican primary. And with Lewandowski out of the picture, it's sort of opened for debate again. Who can be that Republican who will be the closest ally to President Trump in Washington? What is the case you would make for conservatives to pick you over General Bolduc or Speaker O'Brien?
Well, I'm the one that can beat Jeanne Shaheen. That's first and foremost. And I've been consistently supportive of President Trump. And I'm a strong conservative, and I will work hard to beat Jeanne Shaheen. I have the resources to beat Jeanne Shaheen, and I will expose her for the progressive that she is. So the reason to pick me is I'm the one that can beat her.
Speaking of Senator Shaheen, the Senate just held a pair of high-profile votes on these Born Alive bills, essentially, that would potentially criminalize some doctors for performing abortions. Setting aside the philosophical debate, on the practical side, and you've criticized her for voting against those bills, essentially. On the practical side, though, how would you suggest the police go about investigating and arresting doctors?
Well, it's more a question of accountability on the doctors, especially in situations where a baby's born alive and the baby deserves health care, just like everybody deserves health care. A baby born alive after an abortion deserves the same health care as everybody. And the doctor who was in that situation to abort a baby has to immediately shift gears, you know, to provide that baby health care. And I think the Born Alive bill points that out to doctors to provide the same standard of care that anyone else would receive.
So here you say deserving health care. You believe health care is a human right, then?
Oh, I don't, listen, everyone deserves health care. I think the notion that it's a human right, it's a progressive talking point, you know, I think it sounds good, but everyone deserves health care. And in this country, everybody has a way to get health care. All right? If someone's sick and they go to the emergency room, they get health care. All right? In New Hampshire, 94% of granted staters have health insurance. 94%. There's only 6% who don't. And if those people need health care, there's ways for them to get it. Now, it would be great if that 6% had health insurance too. And we've got to close that gap. But 94% in New Hampshire have health insurance.
Just following up on the abortion debate, it hasn't changed in decades. From a pro-life perspective, why not try something different? Incentivizing childbirth or adoption or heavily investing in child services, anything to convince that expectant mother to continue the pregnancy or bring it all the way to term. Why not go in that direction rather than fighting the pitched legal battle that hasn't essentially worked out for pro-life folks in 40, 50 years?
Well, as I've said many times, I am a supporter of the women who lead the pro-life movement. And though the women lead the pro-life movement, and those women provide those kinds of services that you're talking about to women who have a crisis pregnancy or an unwanted pregnancy, that there's options other than abortion. You know, there's options to have a baby. There's options for adoption. There's many loving families out there that would help. And they are compassionate and helpful, and there's help with financial resources. And I've always said culturally we need to take that approach, that we pro-lifers should be supportive, helpful, compassionate, and provide ways for women in a crisis pregnancy to see that there's an alternative to abortion. And the women who lead and run the pro-life movement are very, very good at that. And those organizations are out there.
Let's shift to the coronavirus. Obviously, some very sobering news over the last week in terms of the rate of infection. First of all, do you think there's anywhere the federal government can be doing better? And what would you be doing if you were in the U.S. Senate right now?
I think the most important thing that we can do right now, if in the U.S. Senate and in Congress, is be supportive of the government, be supportive of the president. I think, you know, what the Democrats are doing now, criticizing him no matter what he does, is bad for the country, bad for people, and bad for this crisis situation. You know, we ought to be supportive. The president asked for $2.5 billion. If he needs more money, he'll ask for more. If Congress wants to give him more money, they can give him more money. But he's on top of this. He took bold action early on with the travel ban, and he was criticized for that. It's turning out that was a really smart move, and he followed the advice of the experts early on.
What about CDC funding? It's very easy when you're not in a situation like this to say, okay, well, we can spend this money better elsewhere. If we see you in the U.S. Senate in years to come, are you going to be voting for increased funding for things like outbreak preparedness and things like that, rather than what we've seen there have been attempted cuts on CDC? So that budget comes around. Are you going to be calling for more funding for CDC?
Well, you know, the budget for CDC has gone up while President Trump's been in office. So it's my view that CDC has to be appropriately funded to defend Americans from pandemics or other things. You know, I actually have experience working with the CDC. And so the funding has to be there. But, you know, we've got to start making sure that our dollars are being spent productively and efficiently and effectively. More money doesn't always mean better. Right? We need to hold all bureaucracies accountable to spend our money in a productive way.
Let's get to some local headlines here. You were supposed to give a talk at Dartmouth. It got canceled and kind of shifted around and moved around because of an alleged threat that happened online. The more people looked at that, the less it really held up, and some members of the college Republicans have resigned as a result. It was just all very kind of a tempest in a campus teapot. But do you feel your campaign exaggerated in any way this threat, took advantage of it?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And, you know, we asked the college Republicans that, you know, we'd love to come and talk. And by the way, I went up there and I talked to some college Republicans that night. And when they made the decision that they didn't think it would be safe, you know, we did not push it. I mean, that's their decision. I was a guest, but it is what it is. And, you know, and I think it's appropriate for us to let the world know what happened there. Now, since then, we received a letter from the college Democrats, and part of our response to that letter is, I would be glad to come and talk to the college Democrats, and let's, you know, talk and make an example of what it's like where people with differing opinions can have a civilized discussion. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back and talk to the college Republicans, and I hope that the college Democrats invite me back.
What's your plan to help New Hampshire's North Country?
Yeah, I think a couple things, okay? One is we've got to make sure that to the extent there aren't enterprise zones up there, that we get more of the North Country covered with enterprise zones to bring investment in and bring business in. And that will be a huge driver there. So that would be the first thing. It's, you know, I've been to the North Country several times, and I'll be going back more times. And the folks up there, I think, are ambitious and want to make things happen there. And I think with the appropriate free market incentives, it will help the North Country.
One of the big topics in New Hampshire right now is water contamination, particularly by these perfluorochemicals, PFAS. The EPA just announced that it's involved in criminal investigations, some of these more egregious polluters. Do you think that goes too far? That in any way that these businesses are being held too accountable in some ways?
Well, everybody's entitled to clean water. And part of the government's responsibility is to protect people, and you protect them by making sure they have clean water. I actually visited a water treatment facility and got a tour of the water treatment facility and talked to the person who's running that water treatment facility, and we talked about the impact on him with the PFAS stuff, and his perspective was a little different, that he thinks that the burden's going to be too heavy on what he's doing, and that his water is coming out after they treat it without PFAS issues.
And climate change. Do you believe it's caused by man? And if so, what should the government be doing about it?
Climate change happens. Climate has been changing forever. All right. The man's impact on climate change is minimal. All right. I don't believe that we can do much to impact it. Having said that, we only have one Earth. I consider myself a conservative conservationist, and I'm involved in conservation where I live in Wolfboro. And we all ought to do the things that we can do to protect and preserve the earth. And government has a role in that too. I just think the extremists, that want to take control of all parts of our lives, it's extreme. And the reality is, I don't think that would have much impact anyway. I think being good citizens and doing things to help conserve the earth, and everyone doing their part will help. But I don't think the models that are predicting all this stuff are accurate. I read a couple weeks ago where the models, they found out there was an issue with them, and now they're trying to reconcile all the different models. So I think the progressives are using climate change as a justification to take more government control.
All right, Corky Messner, thanks for joining us on Close Up. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.